Oh my god, I'm already a minute in and I've literally not done anything. Little dance. I don't know if I'm a little bit too high. Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Living Idleness, and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in February. So, the books that I read in February, I read 6. They're here. They're in charge. Large and in charge. Yeah. As we'll kind of go through, you'll kind of see like a theme that I really had. I really liked historical fiction, and also I really enjoyed crime this month. So the first book that I read in February was Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Lani Taylor. So I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars, and I read this book in 2 days. So I clearly enjoyed it. You have no idea what this book is. It follows a 17-year-old girl called Karu, who is an art student in Prague, which pretty standard, right? However, she basically draws these kind of like creatures and these demons in her art book, and everyone's always like, wow, these are so interesting, and she has all these stories about them. Turns out they're actually real. So she basically can go through these doors, which then lead to a shop where she was raised by Brimstone and the other demons in there. And thus, here comes the story of like her living these 2 lives, being an art student in Prague and also being a deliverer for Brimstone, who is like kind of like her father figure. And that's like the world that she was raised in. So the main pros that I had while reading them was that it was super easy to read and it was quite light. Like I said, I read it in 2 days, and I've not read a book in like 2 days for a while. Obviously, everyone's got more time on their hands, so it's a little bit easier, but I also really enjoyed the relationship between Karu and Brimstone. Obviously, Brimstone is kind of like her father figure, and I found that really interesting to read because there was such a power dynamic between the two, because there's that mystery, and there's also the fact that she's in this other world and also in the real world, and he doesn't necessarily get to see her always in this other world, and she doesn't vice versa get to see him. So there's a lot of like kind of mysteries, and there's a lot of things left unsaid that I really like to read. I really like when it's like the subtlety and like not everything is said, and it's like you have to read between the lines, and you can see that power dynamic shift. Often Brimstone will have more information and kind of clap back, and then Karu will often realize something and then also hit back. And so it was just really interesting to read, and it kind of mixes both the regular and the unknown, further cementing the divide in the 2 world, which I was all here for. I really like urban fantasy, and obviously this is quite urban fantasy. The reason that I didn't necessarily rate it any higher was because of the instant romance within this novel. There is kind of an instant romance that's basically destined to be and destined to be lovers, and I'm just never a fan of these. I just think it's not my cup of tea. I enjoy reading the romance developing and going through them build-up stages and basically being like, oh, okay, right, I get the chemistry, I'm seeing the little sparks, and then also like having that faltering. It was a good start to the reading month. Next, we're going to go to The Doll Factory by Elizabeth McNeil. I gave this book 5.5. No, not 5.5 stars. That's off the scale amazing. No, I give this 3.5 stars. I really had no idea what to expect from this book because I bought it really randomly. It was, so Waterstones does the 2 for, like, buy 1 book, get 1 half price offer, and this was one of the books that I bought with that. And so I just kind of really didn't go into it, which I think was the best way to do it. Like, sometimes there's those books that, like, you just go in blind, and a lot of the time I like going into books blind. It's kind of just like, okay. So I'll give a very brief synopsis. This is an historical fiction set in London in 1850, and it follows Iris, who is a doll maker, who's always wanted to paint, and always wanted to, like, learn how to paint. Enter Louis Frost, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Louis Frost, who is an artist, and he's looking for inspiration because he basically wants to get his work featured in the Royal Academy. Obviously follow the lives of 4 characters and how they all intertwined and intersect in this world that is beautifully written. And that's all I really want to talk about plot-wise within this book. I feel like if historical thrillers, historical dramas are your thing, I would recommend picking this up and just figuring it out for yourself, like just going into it blind, because it definitely was not what I was expecting. It really wasn't. The trigger warning though, this book does feature quite graphic animal abuse, quite descriptive, so there is that. But yeah, the characters were beautiful written. I will also, another side note is, I almost did not finish this because I was reading and it got to about 150 pages and I was just not vibing with it. There was something about it that was just kind of really slow and really kind of long-winded and nothing was really happening. But once I got past that mark, things hit off and I literally read it in the night. So I think I was reading this for like a few days and then I got to the page 150 and I just finished it on that night because I just couldn't stop. It was like one of them that I kept on reading up to a chapter and be like, alright, that'll be the last chapter. But then it got to that chapter and I was just like, I'm gonna continue reading until like 2 a.m. So I think I finished this at like 2 a.m. Also, Abe is my all-time favorite character in this book and one of my all-time favorite characters I probably have ever really read. He's so pure, he's just so kind, and you'll fall in love with Abe basically. So yeah, the next book that I read was My Sister the Serial Killer. Again, this is a book that I've had for a while now, and there was lots of hype about this book. I completely just didn't read it. I'm really bad at reading books when there's lots of hype on. I just never really read it. The woman at Waterstones basically told me to buy it, so I did, because I was buying some other books, and I was just like, sure, why not? But this book, basically, if you don't know, which everyone should know by now, follows Karud, who is an older sister to Ayula, and Ayula basically ends up killing her ex-boyfriends. And so Karud is the older sister that has to take care of it and look after it and basically clean up after her sister's mess, which honestly is so interesting and such an interesting concept. And how I kind of want to describe this is almost like a Monty Python thriller, because it's that kind of sarcastic, kind of like dark, low-key humor that I find quite charming in a way. And that humor also kind of really made me like the characters. I kind of related more to Ayula, which says a lot since she's the murderer. I'm just like, But yeah, I genuinely just liked her sarcastic and like kind of her bluntness and her wit. It was just kind of really cutthroat, and the dynamic of the sisters was really interesting. It was something really fleshed out. Basically made the characters morally grey, and it was kind of like, is what they're doing bad? Like, when someone says someone's murdered someone, your instant reaction is bad person, but this book kind of plays on that and makes you kind of makes you kind of question. So I definitely would recommend it if you're looking for a short read that's kind of witty, human. I did wish I could see the characters grow. I mean, in my ideal fantasy, I would want this to like stem their entire life, and then like it gets to them when they're being 80, and it's like death becomes her vibes, where they're just like really sarcastic towards each other, but like there's still that level of love because they only have them like each other. That's kind of the vibes that I got from this, and that's low-key the vibes that you want, isn't it, from a sister? That's just how I wanted to read. But I read The Foundling by Stacey Halls, and I gave this book 3.5 stars out of 5. This was the other book that I got with the buy one get one half price from Waterstones. So I basically got this because of the cover. Right, I never normally read historical fiction, ever, but I read the Crimson Petal and the Why by Michael Faber, and something about that just really gave me a nostalgia for historic fiction. So I definitely read a lot more historic fiction than I normally do. It follows Bess. So Bess is the woman who gives up her child, and that is basically the opening scene, is her giving up her child, which is such a powerful opening scene. So basically the book is in different parts, and the first part is definitely by far the strongest part in this. I definitely felt the most emotionally connected to the characters. I definitely cared a lot more about the characters. I definitely wanted to know what was going to happen. And then in the middle, it kind of deterred from, like, I was kind of like, oh, okay, you know, it's fine. But the story is still really gripping and still really interesting. I would say if you're a fan of like drama and historical fiction, definitely read it. It was worth it. The ending also was too neat. When everything's like too neatly rounded off, I feel like it's just kind of weird. I don't know. I just don't know. But yeah, it definitely was interesting, and the story was definitely worth the read. I next read Camilla by Sheridan Lee Bow. This book is the vampire book that I wanted. This book is definitely the predecessor to Dracula, and this book, I cannot give this book enough hype. So the reason I gave it 4 stars, first of all, is because I think quite a bit of this story is kind of spoiled in a way because it's such a big classic, and so because we've got so much vampire literature, I think some of the magic of this book is lost rather than when it first came out. This book would probably have been like 6 hours, 5 stars, you know? I would have like off the charts been like all about this. But nonetheless, it's still really beautifully written. The plot definitely isn't the strongest point in this. It's definitely the language, and it's definitely the poetic prose, and it's definitely the relationship that forms between Camilla and, I want to say her name's Laura. Laura. I forgot her name. Honestly, Camilla in this book is the main, you know? She's the main. It's named after her. It really strips back what we know of vampires and kind of just goes to their fundamental place, like the heart of what they are, and I really enjoyed reading that. It's very much a book of seduction, and that's what vampires are to me. They're these beings that are like seductive and just basically sex gods. No. You know? But you know what I mean, like, it's seductive. They're there to be charming, they're there to seduce you, they're there to be like feed off you, not just like physically but emotionally and mentally. They feed off you, and I think this book really encapsulated that very well. And I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion or not, but I definitely preferred this over Dracula. The last book that I read was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. Again, another book that I didn't know anything about. I really tend to buy books that I just have no idea what they're about. But, oh, the sun's coming out. Hello, sun. Here comes the sun. Sorry, I get distracted. I get distracted so easily. So this book I gave 3 stars out of 5. This book is about a 15-year-old girl that goes missing, called Ellie. And it follows her mother, Laurel, as she comes to terms with that. And it basically goes 10 years into the future. We've seen that she's still like not being found. She's still disappeared. And the mum's kind of like on that verge of like not losing hope, but also kind of moving on with her life. And then events change, and Laurel basically ends up meeting a man, a stranger, in a cafe one day. And those little bits at the beginning were so kind of cute but weird, and it was so perfectly done that I really enjoyed it. But yeah, so she basically meets this man, and he has a daughter, and it reminds Laurel of her daughter, obviously, naturally. And so she basically tries to figure out what happened. The reason why I gave it 3 stars was mainly because of the voice in this, of the mother. I felt that the mother's voice was very human and very realistic and very kind of very unforgiving in some terms. It's like she would say stuff and you'd kind of be like, oh, and then it's not always something you'd think a mother would do, but in that certain situation it just felt right and it felt raw. And I think that's what I really enjoyed about this, was the mother's voice. That was definitely like the strongest point in this book. What I really enjoyed about this was the family dynamic and what it kind of did to lose someone. So Laurel has another daughter and also a husband who basically becomes her ex-husband. They go through a divorce, and she basically has an estranged relationship with her daughter, Hannah. And I think that was what I really enjoyed reading, was those moments. And I kind of wish that there was more moments in the book that was like that. And I think if that was the case, I would have definitely given it a higher score. This book, however, it definitely isn't on the realistic spectrum. So if you really like your crime novels to be really real and really like neat and tidy, and basically like every kind of plot point, like plot hole has been covered up, this is not going to be for you. If you can kind of just enjoy it for what it is, definitely give it a go. But I found myself a lot of the time thinking, wow, police are dumb. If they just look in one place, if they just look in one place or like asked a question that seemed like a logical question, the entire case would have been solved. And I just think that's what really let this book down, was the police just missed so many things. I'm kind of half divided on the end. I did enjoy the end, but I'm also kind of like, it felt too like a book. Like, it didn't feel like real life to me. And that threw me out of the book. I was kind of like, that, it makes sense, but it doesn't. And I think there was kind of like this build up happening, and the book kind of then just like shifted to be something else, which just really kind of threw me. It was almost like there was another ending, but yeah, I don't know. Also, what I will say is that we kind of find out as well Ellie's fate. Like, I think very near the start we found out Ellie's fate, and I just think that happened way too soon. It just so these were all the books that I read in February. It was quite an interesting month for books. I didn't expect to read that many in February since it's so short, but I definitely enjoyed some of them. Definitely let me know if I should read Puppet and Cake by Lana Taylor in the series. I am planning on reading the rest of the series once I order the books, which should be very soon. And then, if anybody knows any other like kind of like crime or historical fiction novels or anything, because I'm really getting into historical fiction. If you have any recommendations, let me know, because I'm always up for new books. If you've read any of these books, feel free to let me know what your thoughts were, if you agree, if you disagree. That's the beauty of books. We can all agree and disagree on different things, and we can all like different things. And that's why there's multiple books. But yeah, I don't really know how to say bye, so I'm just going to be like, bye, I guess. That wasn't too bad.